Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. Youth detention is an issue which has been, I guess, on the cards for a long time. It's been a conversation that I've had at the Child Protection Party, and it's certainly a conversation I wish to have here. Because one of the problems that we have with youth detention is that we often find that there aren't appropriate facilities in which to house kids. These even include youth detention facilities, which are either understaffed or they don't have the facilities that they need to have within those institutions in order to care for young people. That there are children that are placed in detention who have mental well-being issues, who have issues such as around anger, who are frustrated just generally with the way that they have been treated in the past and the types of situations they've encountered growing up. Many of these kids, sadly, have had not the best beginning in life. And so the question we need to be asking ourselves now is, do we need to detain many of these children in the way that we do? Or is there another way by which we could start to manage some of the problems that these young people have? Now, recently, a situation has occurred in Queensland where the government has chosen to find a way to incarcerate young people in adult prisons. Now, it's true that young people who find themselves in detention centres often revisit their crimes, or even worse, commit further crimes of a more serious nature, and then find themselves graduating into the adult institutions later on. What we need to be asking ourselves is, how do we stop this? How do we change this terrible spiral into a decaying individual's life that causes them to spend a lot of their lifetime incarcerated, or even worse, damaging other people's lives along the way? Well, there are many examples where the best thing to do for children is to try and find appropriate mentors. If they can't find those within their families, because their families may be dysfunctional and may cause, obviously, many of the issues that these kids are facing, but where a child can find a safe place in which they can associate with others similar to themselves and have others within that community supporting them, caring for them, and letting them know that they are individuals of value. Once we have that environment for a child, there's a better chance of them surviving. I saw a news item not long ago on the ABC in relation to Indigenous kids and youth centres that were established for them in remote areas. And it was evident from those videos that I did see that many of these kids found this place, which was a hall which enabled them to play basketball and football and other things, that they felt safe and that they were cared for and nurtured to some extent by other young people, older young people who had been through the same things that they had. So there were peers, I guess, who looked after them, who cared for them, who told them that they had value and that they didn't need to necessarily go down the paths that they have been previously. So there are ways by which these problems can be solved. Governments, though, tend to think of this as being an insolvable problem, just like they do with crime in general. Let's just lock these people up, throw away the key. We have to admit that none of these systems rehabilitate people appropriately. So there's some stuff that we need to do that's a precursor to kids finding themselves detained by the police. Now, unfortunately, the Labor government in Queensland has chosen to step in and to change their laws so that a certain number of people, and it's about 5 people, I think, who have been incarcerated in adult prisons because they were too hard to handle in these other prisons or these other youth detention centres. Now, what this does tell us is that we're crying out for a new system. We're crying out for different ways of working with young people. But we're throwing away the key in the process, and we're not actually doing what we need to do in order to rectify some of those difficult problems. But in relation to Queensland, what they've gone on and said is that the Director General of the Youth Justice Department, Bob Gee, revealed on Thursday the Solicitor General had subsequently informed the government their interpretation of the Youth Justice Act over the past 30 years was likely incorrect. So the government itself had determined that these children should be locked up, where in actual fact that probably wasn't the case. The Act says children remanded in police custody must be moved into youth detention as soon as practicable. Now, the problem that we have here is, like what's practicable. Now, many of these kids, when they commit a crime, they're taken into the watch house and then they're passed on to, hopefully, a youth detention centre, or they're put out on bail or whatever the case might be. But in this case, many of these kids, because of their behaviour, were placed directly into adult facility, which is the worst possible place, because you're placing these kids with a bunch of adults who have got mental well-being issues, where the criminality is so ingrained in them, where there's more likely to be sexual assault and so on. So why do you place kids in an environment in which they're even further likely to be harmed, regardless of the types of crimes that they may have committed as youth? I do not know. I don't understand it, but nevertheless, this is what they're doing. The Act says children remanded in police custody must be moved into youth detention centre as soon as practicable, as I said. Farmer said if a further court challenge was brought, it was highly likely that every single young person would have been transferred immediately from the watch house to the youth detention centre, as I was suggesting. Earlier this year, Queensland magistrate expressed concern about children being held in watch houses where adult detainees are drunk, abusive, psychotic and suicidal. And so it's an unsafe place. Why are we removing children and placing them into what clearly are unsafe places? I do not understand that, don't comprehend it one iota. And the other thing I wanted to raise was that the National Children's Commissioner also made a statement in relation to this, and this is worth noting because this is an independent body who's looking after children in particular and is concerned about the well-being of kids. So Commissioner Holland said, this latest action by the Queensland Government is not based on evidence and will not keep communities safer. And this is the government's claim, is that by locking these kids up, we're going to keep them safer. Well, they're not going to stay in there forever. They're going to come out. And if they're going to come out worse than they were when they went in, how is that keeping the community safe? It's beyond me. Under the Convention of the Rights of the Child, a child should only be detained as a last resort. And as I was saying earlier, these other opportunities that we have to help these kids just don't come to fruition because governments themselves haven't got the guts to be able to change the system efficiently and effectively enough to be able to assist and help any young people. We look at the number of kids that are in foster care and in residential care and all these other places. Clearly the system is failing. This is just another part of that failure. They must also be segregated from all detained adults, not always possible. Queensland's Human Rights Act specifies that an accused child who is detained or a child detained without charge must be segregated from all detained adults. Police watch houses are not appropriate for children. No disputing that. No one would disagree with that. Yet apparently Palaszczuk and her government think that it's okay. The police officer not trained to care for children, and there is no educational rehabilitation provided. There is no access to fresh air or exercise, and many cells have no windows for natural light. Children as young as 10 years of age are being detained for many weeks in these shocking conditions. Commissioner Holland said it's very concerning that the laws are being rushed through without any consultation. The recent toughening of bail laws has led to overflowing children's prisons, resulting in the need to lock up more children in adult facilities in breach of human rights laws. On any level, surely this is a sign of something seriously wrong. This is a system in crisis, and the community is not safer, and certainly not safer for it. So we need to raise our concern about what Palaszczuk government is doing. It's sad. It's a Labor government. They should be thinking a little bit more about kids, I think. No, the government does. Doesn't matter what their political stripes are. They don't seem to care as much about children and what is in the best interest of children as they should. So this is an issue that's getting worse. And the other thing about Queensland too is that we must remember that Queensland only has a lower house. It doesn't have a House of Review, Legislative Council or whatever, or a Senate. It has only the lower house. So they can rush stuff through and it doesn't get reviewed by other members of Parliament, apart from those members that sit in the House of Assembly. So that's a failing of the Queensland system. Queensland fails in many, many ways. This is just another one. So everybody, let me know what you think about all of this. Please subscribe to my channel, make some comments below. What do you think should be done when children are when children are incarcerated? You know, should they be incarcerated for the sorts of crimes that they do, or should we have some sort of mentoring system or some other sort of facility that looks after and cares for these kids in a more appropriate way? Let me know what you think, okay? Make a comment down below. Thanks for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.